Caleb Wilson was a 20-year-old junior from Kenner, Louisiana. He was a member of the world famous Human Jukebox at Southern University and majored in mechanical engineering. He collapsed and died on February 27th, 2025, while participating in an off campus and unsanctioned fraternity ritual allegedly conducted by members of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. According to the latest reports, the fraternity members lied about Caleb's death, claiming it happened when he passed out while exercising. In all likelihood, Caleb was punched in the chest along with the other pledges. That led to a seizure he never recovered from. His family said his passion for life, his dedication to his studies, and his love for music and the Southern University Human Jukebox Marching Band were just a few of the many qualities that made him an extraordinary person. Omega Psi Phi undergraduate chapters are allegedly responsible for the deaths of at least five other pledges dating back to 1978. My name's Cam James. I was abused by an undergraduate chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and I participated in abusing others in two separate semesters after I was initiated. I recently watched Hazing, a brilliant documentary produced by Byron Hurt of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated that explores hazing in all types of organizations: fraternities, sororities, bands, sports, the military, etc. I'd already planned to make this video after Caleb's death, but watching that film made it clear that there was a way for me to contribute something unique to the story. Byron's film mostly covers it in a way that impacts members of Greek organizations and parents of students. What I'm presenting here is the through line from arriving on campus as a freshman to getting abused as a sophomore. I'd argue it's necessary for people on the outside looking in to walk through it themselves and see how this happens to people. I recently spoke to my girlfriend's older brother about this, and he pointed out that everyone gets got in life. We all get scammed, tricked, or manipulated, and our primary responsibility, once we realize it, is to decide what to do next. I also interviewed an unofficial member of my chapter called a ghost. That basically means a person who was hazed and didn't even get their letters officially. We're not supposed to talk about this. We're all sworn to secrecy as part of the pledging process, so this is inherently dangerous. When I say dangerous, I mean it's likely that I'll be ostracized by my chapter and their extended network. I called my line brothers to tell them I was doing this, so I wouldn't put them in a compromising position, but I'll probably be harassed and insulted in the comment section of this video. And yes, I'm very aware that all of the above is highly reminiscent of cult tactics. That isn't a coincidence. Here's my assertions. None of the Divine Nine fraternities or sororities were founded with violence built into their initiation guidelines. All of them have either murdered and or seriously injured pledges via abuse inflicted by chapter members. These practices don't have the intended effect, are rooted in cult tactics and America's legacy of slavery, and do more to ostracize and damage members than anything else. Quick definitions and notes. The Divine Nine, or D9, stands for the nine Black Greek letter organizations founded on college campuses in the 20th century. Those nine are on screen right now. They're also referred to as NPHC organizations, which stands for the National Panhellenic Council. Five of them were founded at HBCUs, with four of those all being Howard University. But the first one was founded at Cornell University as a solidarity group for seven Black students. Regardless of location, these organizations were created to serve their communities and help keep their members safe from the oppressive academic atmosphere that surrounded them. I'll only be presenting one story of abuse for every member organization in the NPHC, but know that many of them have murdered multiple people, sometimes simultaneously. One of them has critically injured or killed people into the double digits since their founding. Regardless of the death toll assigned to each logo, all of them have hundreds of serious injuries to account for at the very least. Kristen High, 22 years old, and Kenetha Saphir, 24 years old, drowned September 9, 2002 at Dockweiler State Beach near Playa del Rey in California, while participating in a pledging ritual allegedly conducted by unsanctioned members of an unidentified chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. The sorority's chapter at Cal State LA had been suspended for hazing at the time, apparently. Both women were students at Cal State in LA, and although their deaths were initially ruled accidental, a private investigation by PI Robert Freeman revealed that they were blindfolded and tied by their hands and their bodies and led into the riptide conditions of the ocean, the family's lawsuit says. That night, the waves were cresting at 6 to 8 feet and creating a strong undercurrent resulting from riptide. Saphir reportedly claimed she couldn't swim, but was forced to proceed regardless. After a large wave pulled her under, High died in an effort to rescue her.
This peels off the Band-Aid of an unhealed wound.
According to the LAPD, the bodies of Kristen High and 24-year-old Kenetha Saphir of Compton were pulled from the surf around midnight.
According to her mother, Patricia, Kristen was always a type A daughter. Super student, athlete, campus leader, mother of a 2-year-old son. Joining Alpha Kappa Alpha was something she had always wanted. When 2 young women brought Kristen's car home, Patricia said Kristen's pledge journal was missing and numbers had been deleted from her cell phone. Kenetha's college sweetheart and husband of about 1.5 years shared this photo of her diary next to a pic of her in the car. In this note, she confirms that pursuing AKA membership was a dream of hers. This was the most recent deadly incident we know of in Alpha Kappa Alpha. Witnesses say they wore matching black sweatsuits, socks, and tennis shoes. This is exactly what we wore every night when I pledged Alpha. I'm getting ahead of myself though. Let's talk about what made me join in the first place. So I enrolled in this pre-college program at Georgia Tech called Challenge. It had us rooming with about 30 to 40 other minority students the summer before our freshman year. So when the year started, we were really well situated and prepared to succeed. I actually stayed with one of my eventual chapter brothers my very first time visiting the campus, which was a coincidence, but ended up being an influential factor. The D9 was not something I was aware of since I was a military kid with no members in my family. At least that's what I thought. Turns out my aunt pledged Delta, but she never talked about it. I was an avid basketball player and regularly ran pickup games at the campus rec center. It just so happens that most of the people I ended up making friends with in those games were members of either Kappa Alpha Psi or Alpha Phi Alpha. One of the Kappas pulled me to the side and discreetly invited me to an interest meeting. And I was gonna go. I didn't know anything about how taboo it is to go to multiple meetings for different organizations until I heard it from my fellow freshmen. This ain't like an informational meeting for the chess club. Your attendance means a serious interest. This was the first time a D9 organization left crucial information out of chapter communications, and it wouldn't be the last. I got the same invite from the Alphas around that time and had to make a decision. It was an opportunity to get more info about a campus organization that hosted dope events, did community service, had a legendary legacy full of civil rights leaders and other prominent black figures, and would give me additional opportunities to make the most of this steep-ass tuition. Not saying those things didn't apply to the Kappas as well.
House Democratic Caucus Chair Hakeem Jeffries joined Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity at the age of 18.
But the Alpha brothers on that campus were most like me. I saw myself in them. Everyone's seeking something unique from their pursuit of membership in the D9. Cults, the military, religious groups, etc. They're following the legacy of their parents or extended family, pursuing the elevated social status brought by membership, seeking a sense of community, or a combination of the three. My family isn't the closest, and although I had plenty of friends, I grew accustomed to moving a lot and leaving my closest friends as a military kid. I wanted the sense of belonging and camaraderie that I saw in the Chapter Brothers. I was discussing this with my girlfriend and others as I wrote this, and the through line from slavery came up. Just like chattel slavery in the US, the D9 is a uniquely African American phenomenon. The way American black people were torn from our home continent, had our names erased, religion replaced, community destroyed, and family members sold off was a significant contributing factor to the establishment of these groups. If you're struggling to put yourself in the shoes of a person who chooses to pursue membership, I'd say that everyone's different and everyone has a different void to fill. There's a lot of people watching this who made it to one of these, but didn't go any further. To keep it short, interest meetings happen in some room on or off campus with one or more members of the chapter. You typically know most of the people in the room because you've seen them at campus events. You're expected to dress up in business formal clothes, and you're given a presentation about the chapter and what it means to be a member. This is followed by the steps you need to take to officially indicate interest in chapter membership. My first interest meeting was pretty short and had way more people in it than the second one. I later realized that the first meeting was so crowded because whoever's currently pledging has to attend one of these in order to join the fraternity on the national level. Some of us have literally never seen these people at the time, and sometimes that line gets dropped by the time you attend your next interest meeting, so they're just gone. The only people at my second interest meeting were the 4 19-year-olds who ended up becoming my line brothers, and another person that ended up deciding not to proceed before we became a line officially. All 4 that ended up being on the line were already friends of mine. At this stage, I essentially committed to becoming an alpha without being informed that we would be subjected to physical abuse. This is the second time information was withheld from us. On February 15th, 1994, Michael Davis and 4 other individuals were being initiated as brothers to the Southeast Missouri State Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Davis and the other young men were slapped on their necks and backs, caned on their buttocks and feet, and beaten with heavy books and cookie sheets.
You pledged in Spring 89. Spring 89 lasted the divine. Did you go through the old school way of pledging at that time, or did they switch it around?
I went through the old school way, bro. This was at a period where, of course, there were cracking downs on hazing and things like that. And of course, Kappa Alpha Psi is a non-hazing fraternity. I got the respect and the notoriety with the brothers that were brought in an old school way. And I'm not saying it's always the best way. And I'm not saying that there aren't unhealthy things that every organization probably does traditionally that should not be done. But I was brought in before a lot of the crackdowns and everything happened with trying to make organizations more safer to enter. My entry into Kappa Alpha Psi was not safe. Can I say it that way?
Are you serious that Kim Fields was a Kappa sweetheart?
Yes, sir.
What did her brother pledge before you or after you?
Her brother pledged before me and pledged me.
Wow, what type of big brother was he?
He was not kind. He was not kind. I got introduced to a phone book by her brother because I forgot to call him.
Active fraternity members kicked, punched, and body slammed the 5 pledges. By the final day of the initiation process, 2 of the 5 dropped out, and the remaining 3 were put through a 7-station circuit of physical abuse. Davis passed out and later died from a number of injuries, including fractured ribs, lung, liver, and kidney damage, a bruised and bleeding heart, and spinal hemorrhaging. Michael's mother, Edith, said her son was a kind soul who couldn't kill a spider, and that his death was cold-blooded murder. The most recent death, allegedly but reliably connected to Kappa Alpha Psi, occurred in 2019 when pledge Marlon Jackson Jr. died in a car accident. It was alleged that his exhaustion was due to pledging, and that these were members of the fraternity in the car. What fraternity did you pledge and what year?
I pledged Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I crossed in 2013, fall in particular.
Are you a registered member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated?
I am not.
Why is that the case?
Because of the very topic that we're talking about. There were allegations of our chapter hazing at the time that ballooned into a larger situation. That situation ballooned into an investigation from the fraternity. We went through that. At that time, we were offline because the chapter wanted everything to blow over and make sure that everything was fine. That investigation came back with nothing against the chapter. However, the fraternity does not operate in innocent until proven guilty. They operate in a more likely than not. And if we had to do it, well, someone's got to take it. So they couldn't bring anything against the chapter at the time, so they instead placed me and my line brothers on the do not initiate list.
So you're not online as soon as you agree to pursue membership. There's an in-between process called pre-pledging. Chapters vary, but people occasionally give you a demeaning name, like the Crabs from Drumline during this part. Some just call you a pre-pledge and leave it at that. We were referred to as Sphinxmen, which was a nod to the Egyptian mythology the fraternity is tied to. Most of what we did during this phase was studying historical information, memorizing facts about our fellow pledges, practicing standing in line, passing information down that line, and basic teamwork exercises. The whole point of the process is supposed to be reinforcing the ideas of selflessness and sacrificing your ego for the good of the chapter. In my 19-year-old brain, everything made sense so far. You got to get rid of all that pride if you're going to serve your community and organization effectively, right? As an extension of that concept, we had to dress identically, commute to these meetings together, and maintain individual matching binders with chapter information in them. We were also required to call older members of the chapter who lived in the area, and we visited some of them too. We even helped one of them move, which seemed like a brotherhood building activity to me at the time, as opposed to indentured servitude. At least we got pizza. This next part is another area where chapters differ. Our Dean of Pledges, the person in charge of our pledging process, was big on Georgia Tech history. So we learned it in addition to Alpha history and Egyptian history. As we got closer to the official start of our pledging process, it became more obvious that reciting this information with military precision and accuracy was not only expected, but required. That was when the psychological abuse started. If we got something wrong while reciting information, our intelligence or ability to follow clear instructions was insulted in a way that would embarrass you in front of the rest of the pledges, while also making you want to prove yourself next time. They also explained the rules to us. Pre-pledging was when we started to withdraw from most friends and campus activities, stopped attending any non-essential meetings, and adopted chapter superstitions like not walking on grass or not using elevators since they represented shortcuts. I later realized that these restrictions were directly out of the cult playbook. If you eliminate someone's ties to outside influences, it's easier to put them through hell. None of this was physical abuse. All that changed when the chapter brothers decided that we were ready for the next step. Were you subjected to hazing?
That's such an interesting question. The black and white of it is yes, but I guess we're diving right into my thoughts. I think that there's a difference between hazing and pledging, I will say. to me, hazing is obviously the definition of it is doing something that puts people in harm's way intentionally. But I also think it's doing something that serves no purpose. I think for me, I pledged. I wasn't hazed. I think, at least from my understanding and everything that I have experienced thus far, everything that I did served a purpose in the process, like in those moments.
We were given a final opportunity to leave before the abuse became physical. We were sitting down in a row after a night of reciting information, and they showed us the segment from Spike Lee's School Days that depicted frat pledges sleeping, being surprised, being verbally harassed, physically abused, and paddled by Breaking Bad's Gustavo Fring and Ron from a Different World, among others. They demonstrated some of this violence on other chapter members, then left it up to us to decide whether or not we wanted to proceed. None of the 5 eventual members of the line moved. And I'll speak for myself when I say the reason for that was a twisted sense of loyalty to my line brothers, combined with a desire to prove that I'm tough enough. It didn't help that the movie scene was exaggerated and goofy, so it didn't seem realistic or shocking to me. Here's a more accurate depiction of what it's like today.
Eat that shit. You want to be an Atlanta, huh? Huh? Don't. Prince. Shit. Stop moving, shit. Don't touch my hand. You want to be a lambda, huh? You blocking me?
I am the Dean of Pledges. This is my line, and every bruise above the neck leads to suspicion.
You want me to rip that fucking brand off your chest? Get the fuck out of my way. Get back in line.
We were not given a real choice here, to be clear. The fact that we were in the room with our fellow pledges and the chapter brothers were staring at us makes it extremely coercive. We went through our first rotation of physical abuse not long after. The 6th potential member of the line that I mentioned earlier wasn't there for that and had dropped out before our first official night online. The details get fuzzy around the timeline, but I remember everything about the first night. It was the worst night of my life. Up until that point in the process, we were at an off-campus house in Atlanta, and every night had been over at a relatively reasonable time. I don't think I have to tell y'all that it was normal to be up super late in college. The night we started pledging was different in 2 distinct ways. We drove way out to one of the older brothers' houses that we visited during pre-pledging, and we had to sit in our car for like 3 hours until we got the call saying that they were ready for us. And this brother was like 40-something years old, by the way. In this video, I'm going to talk about the first night that we went online and how scared I was.
I was scared shitless.
You realize that not only were we children going through this, we were I was 19 years old.
Oh yeah, I had just turned 19.
Yeah,
right when we started.
Yeah, so we're 19-year-olds. I was not only was I 19, I had facial paralysis when this was happening. So not only we're going through this as teenagers, but people who are barely older than us are the ones in charge of our safety. And I don't know if you remember being 2021, I was not in a position to be. No, I was not smart.
I was not smart.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's my main point, is that we're not, like, the fact that we were trusted, or we trusted ourselves with that kind of responsibility, is also daunting in retrospect.
Right.
In the fall of 1989, 18-year-old Morehouse College sophomore Joel Harris collapsed during an Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity ritual and died at the hospital. The pledges were reciting fraternity history, just like we had to, and there were punishments for getting information wrong, which we also experienced. Back in 1989, things were rougher than they are now, for the most part.
Let's get the brand up to, there we go.
That's that Kappa Alpha Psi, yes sir.
They were on the cusp of major crackdowns on hazing, but it was still very prevalent, both before and after.
Beating somebody is dumb. So what has it led to? It's led to death. You can't come back from death. It's led to massive lawsuits. It's led to Divine Nine spending millions of dollars on settlements because some fool decided to hit somebody and made somebody run and somebody died from exhaustion. That is stupid. A mother or a father does not send their child to college to return home in a body bag. That is not what the process is supposed to be about.
Harris was subjected to a circuit of punishments, including one called Thunder and Lightning, which involved getting hit in the chest and slapped in the face. Another was called Free Fall, which involved elbows, slaps, and punches to the chest. He collapsed in the midst of all this, and the postmortem showed abrasions that looked like fingernail marks on his chest. Members denied striking him, and his cause of death was an abnormal heart rhythm linked to congenital heart disease. His mother, Adrienne, crusaded against pledging after his death, and the MPHC banned traditional pledging 4 months after. Alpha Phi Alpha's most recent death that we know of occurred in 2018 when Tyler Hilliard collapsed while pledging at UC Riverside. Attorneys discovered that university officials investigated hazing allegations years prior, indicating that this was an existing pattern of behavior. My chapter considered themselves too evolved to hit people in the chest and slap them in the face, since those were all known to result in deaths and serious injuries. Instead, they resorted to things they considered to be safer, such as slaps on the back, shoving, intense exercises, psychological abuse, paddling, and occasional attacks to any other part of the body that was considered safer to target. That first night at the older chapter brother's house was like getting jumped into a gang. That's really the most accurate way I can describe it. It started at 3 a.m. or so and felt like a ceremony that was gonna end in us being on almost level ground with the brothers of the chapter, with us crossing the burning sands into the next phase of pledging. Then the masks we were wearing were pulled off our faces, and we were immediately sent into a barrage of physical abuse that had no connection to the accuracy of any information we were reciting. It was an excuse for young men to beat on even younger men in the garage of a much older man. It was confusing, loud, and terrifying. If we made a mistake, or they just felt like it had been too long since we were hit, we had to take more punishment. We left with contusions and scratches and met back at the original off-campus house every night after that. We'd usually get a more peaceful session after the really intense nights like that, so we could recover and have some sense of normalcy, which is all part of the manipulation. If it was super violent every night, nobody would make it through. There were nights where we weren't touched at all, and our time was spent reciting info, doing skits or songs as part of our nightly routine, then going home. This helped further the idea that we were responsible for them hurting us. For the most part, the process followed the whims of the dean. If he had a girl over or just didn't feel like doing all that shit that night, it was an easy night for us. No matter what, though, we had to sit around one of our line brothers' apartments, waiting for the call. We knew it was going to be a rough night when the call didn't come in until after midnight. Or if it was a weekend, when more of the brothers would be free to haze us. Homecoming is always the worst night because that's when the alumni were in town and would walk in the house like, "Do you know my name?" We had to memorize the names of every line and line member that crossed before us, stretching back to 1999. So we'd panic trying to put a face to a name without being able to look them in the eyes. Oh yeah, that was one of the rules. No eye contact, along with walking on grass and all the rest of it. Usually, we just discreetly steal a peek at the brother in question and then pass the info down the line. Imagine being 19 years old and 6 to 8 unknown men step into a room that's already hostile and full of older college students. These new men are anywhere from 30 to 45 years old. Most are bigger than you, and you know most of them are not here to be an ally. They eat all the food you had to buy for the house while mocking you and participating in your punishments as a way to show that they still got it. It's just a big ego stroke for everybody involved. Were there times where brothers were either acting out of ego, acting out of just mocking someone that's younger than
Yes,
them and abusing their power,
absolutely.
and times where you felt that the physical harm crossed the line or was completely unnecessary? So if all those things are true, can you still say that this is something we should be doing at all? And also, I would ask you to factor in what's going to be a big part of this video I'm creating is all the deaths and the ways they've happened. Some people have died just as a result of doing strenuous exercise and nothing more. And so, if that's all it takes to create such a drastic result or drastic outcome, going further than that, which is any form of laying your hands on somebody,
Right.
can you still say that that has a justified place in the pledging process?
It's so hard. It's so hard to reckon with because I guess for me it always comes down to like how do you earn your stripes per se? How do you earn your spot being here? Being a part of these orgs is not it's not a given. It's a privilege. And it's for me, it's if we get rid of that, what is the alternative?
Remember Caleb Wilson? He was allegedly punched in the chest by a graduate of Southern University, Caleb McCrae. These older members don't just sit and watch. They paddle you, slap you, push you, and wrestle you. I often considered leaving and fought back often since I had an anger problem, but the frequent message disseminated by the chapter was that dropping line is a sign of weakness, that you're tougher for sticking it out. The most compelling part of that psychological manipulation was that I'd be leaving my line brothers defenseless, since I was the line member in the back. We call that person a tail in the D9 organizations. Usually it's just the tallest person on the line, since we always line up in height order. But I actually chose it, since the line brother directly in front of me is 6'2" like I am. 19 felt mature enough at the time, but in retrospect, we were teens being tortured by young adults. It gives me a new perspective on what people go through joining the military before they can legally drink. Except this was worse than anything you're legally allowed to go through in basic training. Pledges dying in twos is not a one-off anomaly. On November 20th, 2010, East Carolina University students Victoria Carter and Brianna Gather, both 20 years old, died in a car accident after flying off the road in Greenville while pledging with Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Camille Arrington was designated as their driver by members of the chapter, and she survived, along with 19-year-old Taylor King. Arrington was charged with misdemeanor death by motor vehicle. She was apparently suffering from excessive and overwhelming fatigue, exhaustion, and sleep deprivation, according to the lawsuit, and fell asleep behind the wheel. This incident is the latest occurrence of hazing-related death that we know of, attributed to Delta Sigma Theta. This particular story isn't over. I'm going to bring it back after I break down the pledging practice known as Hell Week. Real quick, there's a stage before Hell Week where your restrictions are lifted and you're allowed to fight back against the chapter members, at least within my chapter. Alphas call it Ape Stage, since the ape is the unofficial mascot of the organization. Essentially, you could be in a situation where one of the chapter brothers push you and you push him back, then everybody clears out. It's essentially a one-on-one cage match between you and that brother. And everybody else just circles around and watches. I chipped my bottom tooth when I body slammed a member of the chapter after he called me out one time. We're also given bricks to take care of that have the fraternity letters and our chapter initials on it. We have to take care of them during set, which is what we call those sessions that we met up at. Sometimes the chapter members will try to take your bricks while you're reciting information, and you'll get in trouble if nobody notices that or tries to prevent it. Just mind games like that. We got to hold those bricks out like dumbbells on a regular basis while reciting information. Okay, Hell Week. It's one of those terms that doesn't really need an explanation, but at the same time it does, because it's worse than whatever you're thinking. It's not one of those superficial labels that just means the chapter members up the ante a little bit and don't let up for a week. There's new, more creative forms of torture rolled out specifically for your last week of the process. In our case, meaning within my chapter, not only did the physical violence ramp up for no apparent reason, there was also new abuses. Eating a raw onion without vomiting. Extended exercise periods where breaking formation or position meant more violence. Sleep deprivation. Being taken out into a forest and forced to find each other blindfolded while making animal noises. The list of humiliations was extensive. Again, they considered themselves evolved since they didn't do any of the more disgusting things some white fraternities forced pledges to do, but it's just more excuses to assuage their guilt. Hell Week is a different experience for everyone at each chapter. The Deltas I mentioned earlier had a version of Hell Week where they ate a Delta apple, which was that same onion I mentioned before. And some of their exercises match ours too. Delta Chair, where they stood on one leg and held a brick above their head. Delta Lipstick, which was hot sauce smeared on their lips. Sadistic shit like that. Some people are beaten bloody, experience even more extreme sleep deprivation, etc. We saw our share of bloody moments, but we encountered some chapters that had it much worse than we did. Unfortunately, some don't survive it at all. Donnie Wade Jr. was a 20-year-old student at Prairie View A&M in 2009 and died while pledging Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. He and his fellow pledges were put on a strict bread and water diet, got paddled, did the exercises, etc. They do these exercises at 4 to 5 in the morning when the pledges were sleep deprived, and the workouts included things like elevating your feet 6 inches off the ground, Indian runs where we all run and the last person in line has a sprint to the front over and over again, bleacher sprints, knuckle push-ups, you name it. We did all that stuff too. During one of their sessions, Wade collapsed and never regained consciousness. Fraternity members told investigators that some in the Delta Theta chapter of Phi Beta Sigma were more concerned with, in their words, avoiding a paper line of non-hazed members than they were in the safety of their prospective initiates. Donnie was a biology major, studying to be a doctor. Wade's mother, Katrina, blames hazing for taking her only son from her. She said, "I will not rest until I am sure no other families will go through what we have." I crossed in fall 2009. Donnie died when I was in the middle of my pledging process, and I didn't even hear about it at the time. The culture of secrecy and suppression is so heavy that other fraternities didn't even think to stop what they're doing, rethink their processes, assess their internal ethics, nothing. That could have been any one of us, and my parents would be the ones filing a lawsuit or campaigning for change. I hope they don't judge me too harshly when they see this, because this story isn't over just yet. There's an official national process that takes place while you're wrapping up the chapter process. You put in applications to join the fraternity, show up for a couple of days to go through a quick initiation that involves zero hazing, pay a registration fee, pin fee, chapter dues, all that, which I had to borrow money for, and complete the paperwork. Throughout this initiation, some pledges had to pretend in front of all these middle-aged men that they weren't currently being hazed. The thing is, they know. They all know most of us are being hazed at the moment. And the pledges talk about it openly between themselves. It's the worst kept secret in the world, but the entire system depends on nobody snitching. The main point I want y'all to take away from this is that no one in this system is innocent. The mentors, the regional directors, the chapter advisors, almost all guilty, almost all aware. A Lincoln University vice president of enrollment and student life was cleared of wrongdoing in 1999 after an attorney brought accusations over him watching it happen and saying nothing. As Byron Hurt's hazing doc stated, power has a way of protecting itself. Very few schools get held accountable for this. We had advisors at Georgia Tech who knew it was happening and did nothing. One of them was an alumnus of our chapter and stepped away because he knew for a fact that we were hazing. One of the regional directors knew we were hazing and joked around with us in whispers while we went through the official process. This section is supposed to be a palate cleanser, though. Let's get to the good part. All right, this is the part of the story most college students are aware of, the part the public is supposed to see. We crossed on November 13th, 2009, and completed our pledging process. It felt just like the first night, except they're suddenly celebrating us instead of beating on us. After that, you're a full member of the chapter, and it's time to debut for the campus at large in your probate show. There's flyers made, a promo video, you get a crispy haircut and dope outfits, and the whole Black community shows up to celebrate your moment. There's step choreography we worked on for weeks, elaborate songs and funny skits we had to practice performing every night. Then each member gets their big moment. Step out, say your name, remove your mask, crowd goes wild, women ooh and ah. Half the people there knew you were doing it, and the other half didn't know you at all. For them, it's a hell of an intro. Parents and siblings show up, significant others hold balloons with your number, all that. I didn't have any of it because I was essentially cut off from my community in Atlanta and kept a secret from them, granted. Didn't really care too much though, to be honest. I was just happy to talk to my friends and return to normalcy again. You basically return to campus life with an elevated social status and excuse to walk around with the most gaudy jewelry and shirts on for the rest of the semester. Then, for some of us, comes the crash. I don't know if I said this earlier, but I attended Georgia Tech, the Georgia Institute of Technology, bruh. I had to get a perfect 800 on a reading SAT just to get in that joint, and I was an engineer at the time. Our frats like to brag about scholarship and service, but there's no real protocols for the effect hazing has on your grades or your ability to serve anyone. I'd withdrawn from membership in ASU and NSBE, was failing 2 classes, and failed another one in the next semester before ultimately ending up on academic probation and changing majors. I did really well after that, but between suffering 1 semester and partying too much the next semester, school really fell down in my list of priorities until I got my shit together. We're gonna fast forward a couple of lines later, and now I'm in charge of discipline, while one of my line brothers is the dean of pledges. Yes, we perpetrated the same violence that was done to us onto other young men who looked up to and trusted us. I perpetrated that violence with my hands, with my voice, with my silence, while others did the same. This abuse included slapping them on the back, paddling, intense workouts, verbal abuse, mockery, and humiliation. The normalization of that violence is what enables a new initiate to keep the cycle going. Everyone just treated it like it was normal, like this was a rite of passage everyone just deals with. None of it is an excuse. And I sincerely apologize to everyone I helped victimize as part of that system. Nothing I say here can heal that harm we did to you, and I hope you can forgive me one day. But forgiveness is for you. You don't owe me that. I hope you've all found the peace that I'm building for myself. Did you subject others to physical harm after you were initiated?
Yes. Part of the responsibility of brothers once they're in is to also participate in bringing more brothers in as they come through. And some of that includes furthering those traditions and keeping those in place. I will say that from my standpoint, things were not as chaotic as they have been in the past. That is certainly something that a lot of us in our chapter took the time to think about moving forward. Because, I mean, we see the stories too. We know how any sort of incident looks on all of us.
I'll list off the remaining organizations that haven't killed anyone that we know of, but are complicit in serious injuries and psychological harm to survivors. Criminal charges were brought against Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated chapter members in 2004 after a pledge said she was paddled, pushed against walls, and more at Southern Illinois University. Her chest and arms were severely bruised, and the perpetrators included students and alumni. The charges were later dropped, and there's info in the description about another case that occurred at OSU in 2013, where a chapter was suspended. Criminal charges were brought against Iota Phi Theta Fraternity Incorporated chapter members at Lincoln University in 2015, after a student was injured during initiation hazing procedures. The 2 chapter members were suspended, then later charged with aggravated assault and lesser charges. Lastly, a Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated chapter at Bowling Green University was permanently suspended in 2022 for severe hazing violations that violated 6 of their student safety policies. They also exhibited a pattern of secrecy and deception in an effort to avoid detection, which happens at every chapter that hazes students. The list of things they did is included in the source, and it's not a pleasant read. So, what's being done to stop this? Well, I left out some of the repercussions and consequences for that reason. There have been serious crackdowns and other situations where the people in charge of protecting these teens and young adults absolutely dropped the ball. The deal that kept Kenitha and Kristen's cases out of court included a financial payout that the families are not allowed to disclose and a promise by the sorority to work harder to end hazing, which I don't know what that means. More than a dozen men associated with Kappa Alpha Psi were prosecuted after Michael Davis's death, including 7 for involuntary manslaughter. Sentences ranged from probation to incarceration. The fraternity was banned from Southeast. The fallout included legislation in Missouri, creating a felony for serious hazing, and national scrutiny of fraternity hazing practices. In 1996, the Kappa Alpha Psi National Organization paid $2.25 million to David's parents as part of a lawsuit. The 2 deaths associated with Delta Sigma Theta resulted in the ECU chapter getting suspended until 2015, which was a 5-year ban. Victoria Carter's mother, Bernadette, filed a wrongful death suit against the driver of the car and amended it later to add sorority members to the list of defendants. There's databases of chapters that have been suspended temporarily or permanently on the official sites of many of the D9 organizations. But I can tell you from personal experience that it's practically impossible to stop these underground processes.
How do we build that bond outside of that? You know, especially when, like, the only thing that I can maybe think of is, like, you make that long term, but then it's like, how do you long term college?
D9 doesn't see pledging as a college thing. This is for life. So, do you think trauma is necessary to build the correct version of an alpha man?
I guess that's a part of the conversation that we have to be a part of, because the answer is no. The feeling is that's what I experienced and that's what I know.
Yeah.
And I have seen that work for plenty of us. Like, I don't think I would change anything about how things went with me. I don't think I would be in the position that I'm in today had they went, without hazing or pledging. Even with the situations that went bad, like, I don't think that I would be in the position that I'm in right now had all of that just went so smoothly.
As long as we hold up abuse as the only way to confirm someone's real membership in these communities, more parents will get terrible news in the middle of the night. We've adopted the same tactics slave owners used to break and manipulate our ancestors, the same tactics cult leaders use. Hazing does not strengthen men or women. These organizations are killing people. A large number of older members in every organization are complicit, and the only people who can really make a difference are those who went through it. I feel the same way about the D9 as I feel about the American government and our two-party system. It needs to be torn down from the inside. I stepped away from active pledging activities after the first line I actively brought through and distanced myself from it altogether upon graduation. I went on a Twitter rant about the treatment of women by Georgia Tech's D9 chapter some years back as well, and mentioned how I was hazed. Wasn't received well then, probably won't be received well now either. In case it wasn't obvious, I'm officially denouncing my membership in Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated until such time that considerable efforts are put forth to eliminate this problem across the board. I'm not asking anyone to join me. I know that I'm in a unique position due to the fact that I haven't surrounded myself with the brotherhood in my 30s. I am asking you to share this with anyone considering joining one of these organizations, as well as any alumni who remain silent. This problem is not something I can solve with one video. All I can do is use this platform to end my silence. Y'all got the information now. Can't say I didn't tell you.